Use the commutative and associative properties to find the product. Okay, if you remember, and if you don't know yet, the commutative properties and the associative properties of multiplication say, well, let's look at commutative first. The commutative property, if you have two numbers multiplied by each other, it doesn't matter which order you multiply them in. So if you have two numbers, a times b, that's going to equal the same thing as b times a. And if you want to put real numbers in there, you can. So if you have 2 times 3, which is 6, that's going to be the same thing as 3 times 2, which is also 6. And that can also work if you have more than two numbers. Let's say you have 2 times 3 times 4. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, and then 6 times 4 is 24. So it's 24. Well, that's going to be the same thing as 2 times 4 times 3. So 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 times 3 is 24. And that's also going to be the same thing as 3 times 2 times 4. So 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 times 4 is 24. So it doesn't matter what order you multiply numbers in. As long as the problem is all multiplication, then you can multiply them in different orders, and you'll always get the same answer. And that's the commutative property of multiplication. And then if you look at the associative property of multiplication, it's almost the same thing, only instead of changing the order, you change, well, you kind of change the order, but you're using brackets to organize things, to group things. So you use parentheses. So in this first one, if you have three numbers, a times b, which are in parentheses, times c, you should get the same answer as a times and then b and c. So b times c, and the b and the c are in parentheses. So you'll get the same answer, and we can use the same numbers or different numbers. Let's say a is 2, b is 3, and c is 4. So 2 times 3, which is in parentheses, will give you a 6. And then 6 times 4 will give you 24. And then you'll see you'll get the same answer if you do 2 times, and then b and c are in parentheses, and b is 3 times 4 is c. So if you do what's in the parentheses first, 3 times 4 is 12. And then you multiply that whole thing times 2. And you'll get 24. So as you notice, it doesn't matter where you put the parentheses. You'll get the same answer eventually. And so we want to use those two properties when we're multiplying whole numbers and fractions. And we'll use those properties to be able to use a little more mental math and be able to get to our answer a little bit faster with a little bit less work. So let's look at this example. 4 times 5/7, and that's in parentheses, times 35. Okay, now using the associative property, I can rewrite that as 4 times, and then put the 5/7 times 35 in parentheses. And the reason I want to do that is because I know that 35 is divisible by 7, which is the denominator of the fraction. So if you remember in our other lesson, sometimes it's easier to do the division part of your multiplication first when you're dealing with fractions. So we'll use that in this situation. So we do 35 divided by 7, which is 5, and then we multiply it times the numerator, which is 5, and you'll get 25. So 5/7 times 35 is 25, and then we can multiply that whole thing times 4, and you'll get 100. So your answer will be 100. And by using the associative property, you are able to do a lot of that work in your head rather than writing it all out. and using larger numbers. Because if we did it the other way, and let's do it the other way just to show you how much more work it's going to be. So 4 times 5 sevenths. Well, we can't divide 4 by 7, so we're going to multiply the numerators. So 4 times 5 is 20, and you put that over 7, and then you multiply that times 35. And now we can either use our division first and then do multiplication, which I think would be a little bit easier, or we can multiply 35 times the numerator and then see if we can simplify after that. But let's do the division first. So 35 divided by 7. 35 divided by 7 is going to be 5. So we'll be left with, well, let's do it the other way so I can show all of the work. We'll do 35 times 20. So 35 times 20. 35 times 20. Well, 0, we can just bring that down to a 0. 2 times 5 is 10. And 2 times 3 is 6. Plus 1 is 7. So 20 times 35 is 700. So when we multiply this, we get 20 times 35 over 7, which is going to equal 700 over 7. And then we can do 700 divided by 7. Well, 7 goes into 7 once. And then you have 2 zeros. So it's 100. And we'll get the same answer that way. But if you remember that you can use the associative property to collect things, and then also remember that when you're multiplying by a fraction, you can do the division first and then the multiplication, you'll see that you'll get to the answer a lot quicker using the first way that we did it. And I hope this makes a little bit of sense. Let's do one more example just to use our new method. Let's use 15 times 8 times 2/3. Okay, now in this problem, there's no parentheses. There's no parentheses, but we can use the commutative property, which says that we can rearrange the terms. Since it's all multiplication, it doesn't matter which order we do them in. So I'm going to move this 2/3. Well, I'm going to switch the 2/3 and the 8, and I'm going to rewrite it as 15 times 2/3 times 8. And then I'm going to do the first two. I'll do the 15 times 2/3 first, because I see that 15 is divisible by 3. So I can do the division first. I'll do 15 divided by 3, which is 5, and then multiply times the numerator, which is 10. 5 times 2 is 10. So 15 divided by 3 is 5, times 2 is 10. And then I can multiply it by 8 and get 80. And that's all there is to it. You may want to practice with this. And if you're still struggling with the concept, you may want to just do some examples one way and then try them with this new method, or rewatch the video to see the different steps. And I'll see you in the next lesson.